I think the maturity of blockchain and the widespread adoption very much depends on use case and industry. It will also depend on the region you're looking at. We're already seeing in some regions like Singapore, China and Russia, there's an increased experimenting and testing. I think for the financial services industry, we're probably looking at 3 to 5 years for some use cases coming to life. I think if you think about a foundational change, that's probably even 10 plus years. Bear in mind that the principle of distributed ledger means that a group of people agrees on one tech stack and one set of operating rules. And I think until that happens and until we have solved a couple of the outstanding challenges around data privacy and the legal and regulatory requirements which need to be addressed, until then some of the use cases won't move forward.
I would think that 2017 was the year where we saw first people thinking about it in much detail, and now we have achieved a good start. 2018 we'll see implementations and a lot of detailed discussion. And then I think for end consumers, 2019 will be the first case where there will be broader interactions really with blockchains. And I do hope it's the same for insurance.
Yeah, so I think it's going to take a number of years for blockchain to become mainstream, especially across non-financial sectors. The notion for Joe Bloggs of having to send a transaction to a public address and validate it with their private key is something that isn't understood by the majority of people. So I think blockchain has to take a number of steps, or the kind of the industry has to take a number of steps to make that experience more user-friendly.
I think it's difficult to say when there will be widespread blockchain adoption. I don't have the answer. I don't think a lot of people do have the answer, but I think that the adoption will be gradual, steady. It also depends on the industry. So for instance, in the financial industry, there's a heavy regulation. So even though the technology might be ready for a specific use case, we also need to make sure that the regulatory framework is also ready for this. So maybe the tech will be ready in 1 year or 2 years, but maybe the regulations will be ready in like 10 years or so. So I would say like widespread adoption, at least 5 to 10 years, 5 being very optimistic.
Nobody can tell when the blockchain will be widely adopted. But I guess the question behind that, the intent behind that question is, as an industry professional, as a CEO of a company in the insurance industry, for example, what could I do facing this blockchain wave, right? So if I could answer that question, then I would say blockchain is definitely a transformational trend and similar to the internet. So if we use that analogy, you'd better be involved earlier than later.
Widespread adoption will happen when we see successes of the current POCs and pilots are going on, and then I think the industry will then decide if those are successful, we might see exponential growth. Or if they're not so successful and the technology doesn't stand up under the strain, then maybe it'd be more linear. But I think my guess would be about 10 years' time we'll see widespread adoption, would be my guess.